So I think on an everyday basis, it's just about finding the humor in little things. So, for example, I was really sick last week, and I had to keep, muting myself during lessons to blow my nose. So I just made a joke about it, and I just joked about how this particularly well-designed maths question is making me really emotional, or we invented a. I found that although I did really well at school, I didn't really feel prepared for the real world when I left at all. So even at uni, I think when it came to actually dealing with real life things, I didn't feel prepared, and that fed into my tutoring style later on. Spot the mistakes is something that's been really popular as well, and I find these on Twinkle all the time. Kids love to spot mistakes, and the nice thing about these is that you can spot kind of the factual mistakes, but also grammar mistakes. And so it allows for students who are still, finding a topic difficult, but at least they can build their confidence a bit by spotting a punctuation mistake or something like that.
Hello and welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast, the podcast that brings you the latest in the world of tutoring, edtech and education, and hopefully inspires in you the big change that each and every one of us is capable of. Qualified Tutor is an industry-leading tutor training organisation and online tutoring community for thousands of tutors around the world. This podcast is the voice of this community, where we aim to hear from tutors, teachers, entrepreneurs, coaches, business experts, students, tutorpreneurs, and more from the world of tutoring about what inspires them every day, how they can help tutors like you, and what they've learnt about tutoring along the way. The question is, what will you learn today? Hello and welcome to the 144th episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast. My name is Ludo Miller, the host of this podcast. Welcome back to regular listeners. Welcome to any of you for whom this is your first time listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast. And a very, very warm welcome to our guest today, Roshan Daryanani. Roshan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. I mean, from the moment we've spoken, you've always been so generous and so kind. So I'm really happy to be here and excited to chat.
Yeah, I mean, I think, of all the guests I've ever had, you've prepared me the best. Roshan sent me this lovely list of things that we could discuss, things she'd like to discuss, things that she thought might be useful to our audience. So there's going to be a wonderful conversation here, I think. I hope I've picked on the strand that will be most applicable to you guys, our listeners today. But yeah, Roshan is, some of you may well have come across Roshan in the many hats and guises that she takes. But if you haven't come across her, you'll be amazed at everything that she's done and that she does currently do in her role as a tutor, as an author, as a content creator, as a whatever, name it, in the education and kind of learning space. And Roshan has probably been there and done that. But as a little background, just so that we know where Roshan is coming from today and kind of placing a bit of context to that. Roshan grew up in Tenerife, Spain, I believe, and moved to London in 2008, and since then really has taken on several roles in education, as I mentioned, through her uni days and then into her professional career. So a qualified teacher, a maths, biology, Spanish tutor with over 7 years experience, including with children with SEND, a content creator, a YouTuber with thousands of views, and an author of 2 books, a blogger on Medium with over, I think it's over 200 articles, isn't it, Roshan? A designer, an innovator, and really a whole host of other skills and experiences. So I would say is the true meaning of the term a portfolio career. Roshan, maybe you do or don't agree with that, I'm not sure. But yeah, so really a lot of places that Roshan is coming from today, and we're going to try and boil it down to a few key aspects, really about how you bring your unique flavour to every tutoring session. Now, regular listeners will know that there's a segment we tend to begin with about harking back to the old school days of our guests. Now, Roshan has actually been able to locate some school reports, although I don't know the content of them. So this is the first time I'm hearing them, just as it is for you guys. So Roshan, please do give us a little flavour of what it is that your school teachers thought and said about you way back when.
First of all, thank you for that lovely intro. You made me feel very proud. You painted a great picture there, and yes, I was really happy to be able to find these reports, and I think it's thanks to my parents who've done a great job of keeping these throughout the years. So I'll just read out a little segment which I think summarizes them. I was that annoying kid who got really good. I was, academically very able, apparently. This is what it says. So it says, Roshan is a serious but very hardworking and dedicated pupil. She still knows how to enjoy herself, however, and she socializes well with other members of the class. She's academically very able, and she sets high standards for others to aspire to. I thought that was great. I was like, I don't know who you're talking about, but that was one of my favorite comments.
That is one of the finest school reports. Your parents must have been intensely proud.
They were very proud, yes. Yeah, so, and this was a very kind teacher. You can say about teachers and the best.
So do you remember that as a kind of general pattern from your school days, was that teachers were very happy to have you in their class?
Yeah, what's interesting is that, yes, I think academically it was always about the academics, but it's interesting. There's a mix there with different teachers saying slightly different things, and I think it was very much about the relationship with each teacher, which brings us to what we're talking about today. And also, I found that although I did really well at school, I didn't really feel prepared for the real world when I left at all. So even at uni, I think when it came to actually dealing with real life things, I didn't feel prepared, and that fed into my tutoring style later on.
Why do you think that you didn't feel prepared, even though you were top of the class, front of the class, whatever way you want to look at it? Why do you think then that still didn't prepare you?
Yeah, first of all, I should say, also this is Tenerife, so it was a tiny school, so it was very easy to be top of the class. But I feel like that's a little disclaimer there. But also, I just feel this, and I hope that many educators will resonate with this, that a lot of the content that we learn at school, we don't really use on an everyday basis, right? Case in point, when you said this was your 144th episode, classic math tutor, my first thought was that, 12 squared. And actually times tables is something that you can use, but there's so much that we do, trigonometry or certain aspects of science or things like that, which they don't use every day. And so that's been one of the many things I've been reflecting on, which is about kind of the how we teach, but also the what we teach is not really something that they can use every day. And I feel like that's a part of the educational system that really needs to change. Yeah.
So that's something that clearly was imbued on you from the early days, and you, I'm sure, learned a lot from the teachers that you had as a child. What do you think then is the kind of why? What is the force, the mission behind where you are today and why you do what you do?
That's such a great question for anyone to ask themselves, whether they're a tutor or not, or whatever aspect of education they work in. So I think kind of on a surface level, obviously my why is helping my students to make progress, helping them value their own strengths, filling in gaps in their knowledge, and also helping them enjoy their sessions. That's really important to me. But there's a much deeper and stronger why beneath that, which has evolved over the years, I would say. And it is to help them learn what I wish I would have learned at school in whatever little ways I can do that. And that is, again, I said about what they learn, but also the way they learn it. So some of the skills I wish I'd learned are simply just having a much better attitude towards making mistakes and just realizing that they're normal. Learning to trust your intuition, actually questioning things deeply and not just accepting everything that you're told, having that whole different attitude to learning, right? Which I think some of our teachers were great at giving us, and that's something I strive to give them a flavor of Even if it's that limited contact time in the week, right? I'm hoping that will make a little bit of a difference. And I do feel like the school system isn't really structured, unfortunately, to help give us those things.
Do you think you knew that when you were at school?
That's a great question. I don't think so, no. I think I only realized it when I went to uni and actually started reflecting on it. When I was in school, it was very much kind of going with the flow. I think I realized it maybe, around the time I was 18, 19 is when I started to think about it.
Why? Because that was the time when you had to take charge of your own learning suddenly, or was it something else?
I think it might have been that, yes. So it was a bit of that, and, where it was a very different learning environment and everything was a lot more independent. And then it was because I started thinking about actually going into education. So I explored a lot of alternative educational programs and these very unusual schools where students vote on everything they have to do. And I just thought they were really interesting. And I wondered why mainstream teaching is all pretty similar. But it was really interesting to find these alternative schools and different ways of thinking and different ways of learning.
Yeah, it's a funny one for tutors and teachers to grapple with, isn't it? It's because tutors and teachers are, often mostly adults, and they've been through that learning journey themselves already, and they've reached a point where they understand some of the deeper meanings of learning and some of the ways in which learning what it can do in a broader sense. But often the people that you are teaching or tutoring are not there yet. They're getting there. They're on their way there. They were at a position that you were in, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago. And I often find this in my tutoring, even though I know I need to put myself in the student's shoes on understanding the broader point or purpose of learning. It can sometimes be hard when they don't see it the way that you do. So I think that the way that you make learning fun and perhaps subconsciously show them the value of learning without them maybe realizing it, is such a good way for them to take that step from one to the next. I wonder then whether you, in one sense, whether you agree with what I've just said, but also not wishing to put words in your mouth. But what do you really see as the point of tutoring? What can it do for a child?
Yeah, again, a question that I think everyone who's ever worked in education asks themselves, right? Because I have to say, the people I've met who work in this field, whether they work in schools or elsewhere, they're really dedicated to doing the best that they can and love their students. So I would say, do you mean the point of tuition as opposed to, for example, their learning at schools or their other kind of learning that they do?
Mm.
Yeah. I think, again, it's not the fault of teachers, but I feel like the school system isn't structured to give us a lot of those things that we need. And so for me, a lot of the tuition is about the relationship between the student and the tutor. And I hope that what I'm doing there is just kind of modeling, again, all the things that I would have liked to have learned and the way that I'd like to have learned it. Just because there's so much more freedom as a tutor in that, in the hour, in the half an hour that you have to choose activities, to have jokes in there, to get to know the student a little bit. And I find that the stronger the relationship I can build with a child, and especially because, you can get to know them over a year or at least several months, the better the sessions go. So I think the point there is for the student to realize that there's lots of different ways of learning, that it can be fun, that it doesn't have to be kind of just sort of practicing things to pass a test, but that there can be a lot more to it. And I just think that the tutoring allows for that because of the way it's set up, especially one-to-one tutoring, but even small group tutoring allows for students to see a completely different way of learning.
With thanks to episode sponsors, the Tutor Index.
Hi there, I'm Chris, co-founder of the Tutor Index. It's incredibly exciting to be sponsoring this episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast. Whether you're just starting out or have been tutoring for a number of years, the Tutor Index provides a great platform to promote yourself to new and existing clients and allows you to teach how you want, when you want. Best of all, we charge zero commission or finder's fees, meaning you keep more of what you earn. So sign up today for your free profile at thetutorindex.com.
So could you give us a little insight then, Roshan, over all of your years of tutoring and of the learning environment, about some of the ways that you keep your sessions light and fresh and unique?
Yeah. Thank you. So nice to share these. I have to say, I absolutely cannot take credit for them. It's come from years of seeing what other people do and stealing from them. And,
that's the mark of a good professional, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes. That's what they say. Yes, it's it's on my CV as well. Good at stealing ideas from other people. So I would say there's a few key things that I thought I hope will be helpful to share. One is kind of, well, to start out, I would say it's really important for whatever you use to be sustainable. So when I was doing my PTC, when I was doing my teacher training, I found, I had these amazing peers I was working with, who were working to make every lesson outstanding. And I admired that so much, but I was absolutely incapable of doing it. And so I also saw a lot of burnout, right? And so I think it's taken me a long time to realize that what works for the students is also what works for you. So I think it's really important to use what's out there instead of trying to reinvent the wheel in every lesson. That's not going to happen. And so I think the two main websites that I use are the TES website and also Twinkle. I've been using recently quite a lot. And so to give you an idea of the kind of resources I use, one of them is Tarsia puzzles. Have you ever come across them, Ludo? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so they're quite nice. They're very simple. You print them out and there's these puzzle pieces and you have to match kind of a keyword with a definition. So quite good for science, arts, anything like that, where you've got to learn a lot of keywords. And they've actually been surprisingly popular recently. And I think it's interesting, right? We live in such a digital world, but actually I've noticed that even older kids still really enjoy actually kind of making a puzzle and doing it in a competitive way. So these puzzles actually were so useful to me at a course I was teaching recently at a school. So this was October half term, and I was teaching 4 15-year-old boys who they would have loved to be anywhere but a classroom at 9 a.m. in the morning. And so I realized after the first day I needed to do something more engaging, and I gave them these puzzles. And I think it was the competitive nature of them, but also having something in front of them where they weren't looking at a screen. They loved them, and they went from literally falling asleep to actually being really excited about this. And so I think the competitive nature of it, or having something analog, having something a little bit different, they seem to love. Spot the mistakes is something that's been really popular as well, and I find these on Twinkle all the time. Kids love to spot mistakes, and the nice thing about these is that you can spot kind of the factual mistakes, but also grammar mistakes, and so it allows for students who are still finding a topic difficult, but at least they can build their confidence a bit by spotting a punctuation mistake or something like that. So that's been another one that's interesting. And recently I'm looking at sort of seasonal kind of quizzes, puzzles, things like that. Just anything that will lighten, lighten the mood a bit and get the students engaged. That's always a great way to start. I think those are some of the things that have helped me.
There's so many ideas in there, really. And I love those to make it sustainable, make it engaging, and kind of lighten the mood. I think so often tutoring takes place, just after school hours, and a student, if we think about, the actual context and the reality of a tutoring session, it's often at the end of a school day. We all remember going to school. We felt tired after the end of a school day. There's lots that's happened at school. You're growing up. You're under pressure. You're whatever. I'm trying to make friends. So lightening the mood is a great way, I think, to start that, because, as you say, children do love learning. No child doesn't want to know things and to get better at things. It's just the way that you present it. And I think giving them that really nice, easy, low-hanging fruit kind of way for them to feel like they're improving and also to improve is such a key way to kind of get them on side. And also, if you can get them on side, then they're going to go to their mom or dad or whoever their guardian, and blabber away about how much they enjoyed that session because they got to do this and this, and they got to play this. So you're actually getting the parent or guardian or teacher on side as well. Do you find that you how much of a kind of relationship do you have with the parent in the tutoring kind of environment, Roshan?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's so important. I think I do have a pretty strong relationship with a lot of the parents, especially the students I've had for many years. And I also think that's really useful for tutors, because then they can, especially when you're getting to know the student, they can tell you things you need to know. In many ways, I've been really lucky with the students I have. And so mostly I found it really useful, and I often learn from the parents. And yeah, it's a different thing. It's another difference, I think, compared to people who work in schools. I think we often have a lot more of a relationship with the parents. At least that's what I found in my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You often, you mentioned to me when you've sent that first great kind of resume almost of what you could bring to the podcast, Roshan. And one of the other things that really caught my eye there was this idea about encouraging students to return, to every session with enthusiasm, or at least, if not actively, then subconsciously making them want to return every session. Could you give us some of your tips there about how you are able to get students returning every session with enthusiasm?
Yes. And again, this is my aim. It's not something I always achieve. It's such a great feeling when I achieve it. I think keeping things real, relating it to their interest, and also keeping it humorous. So let me give you some examples of those. One is, for example, I think I mentioned this to you. So one of the things I did is set them a little challenge. This is for my math students. So when they go to the supermarket, they can design their own cookies, but the ingredients they buy have to be under a certain budget, or they have to find items that have been discounted by around 25%. Sort of little challenges like that, which they have to do in everyday life. I occasionally, when I had more time, sent them little challenges through the post. So they loved a maths advent calendar where they had a little maths puzzle every day. But again, I think, like I said before, it is about keeping it sustainable. Those are not things you can do every day. So I think on an everyday basis, it's just about finding the humor in little things. So, for example, I was really sick last week, and I had to keep, muting myself during lessons to blow my nose. So I just made a joke about it, and I just joked about how this particularly well-designed maths question is making me really emotional. Or we invented a game of called tissue paper basketball, which I was really bad at first, but it sounds like we're wasting time. So my husband often asks me, how much learning are you actually getting done? Which is a great question. And I think it's really important, actually, because when you kind of are yourself and are a little bit goofy with them, you're modeling that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to, to be imperfect. And I think that I've found that when they relax in that way, they just, the learning is a lot easier. So I think it's actually important. Maybe it's my defense, just having a lot of fun. And the other thing that is sort of, I've been trying to do recently, and ironically, I have a lot to say about this, but it's about talking less in sessions. I don't know if you've thought about this, but I think as a tutor, my aim right now is to try and talk less, because I think we have a tendency to go in and rescue students, when they don't know an answer, which is always going to happen often, right? And it's difficult for us to allow more silence and to encourage them to do the talking, right? And I think what it's made me think about is having these little guideposts where, for a period of time, what I'm going to do is focus on just allowing them to talk more, for example. And I could change that guidepost. So maybe in a few months' time, it might be focus on, how do I get them to ask more questions or feel better about making mistakes? But this one about talking less, that's been really useful, because, they don't feel talked at all the time then. And they actually come back and, they know that it's okay to just explore, and they know that their first answer isn't going to be the one they have to go with, kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that focus on marrying together not feeling that they need to worry about making mistakes, with being the ones who have to create and, initiate and, activate almost, rather than, as you say, the tutor prompting them for the right answer if there's a moment of silence. I don't know if you follow cricket, Roshan, or if any of our listeners here follow cricket, but the England cricket team's revival in recent months has all been down to a change in attitude in which the coach and the captain have said, if you make a mistake, even if you make a series of mistakes across a number of matches, you won't get dropped, you won't get criticised, you won't get, whatever it is. And I think that's allowed them to play with their freedom, and their results have improved. And I think it's exactly the same as the learning environment. If they feel pressured about making a single mistake, then they squeeze, they what's the word? They kind of contract almost. In both mind and body. And I think if you allow them to be happy to have made a mistake and actually to revel in that, and maybe to create a little game out of the mistake they've made, or as you say, to create a fun little activity out of the mistake they've made, and not see it as a kind of red marker pen moment. Roshan, I think there's such useful tips there, coupled with your philosophy around learning, which shines through really, really strongly. So thank you very much for spending the time detailing that. And now a brief word from one of two guests last week, Lucy Toghill, whose episode with her son Thomas you can catch after this.
What I've enjoyed most about being a guest on the Qualified Tutor podcast is actually speaking with like-minded people, which is so rare these days, and having the opportunity to spread awareness about Tourette syndrome itself. What I've learned about myself and the actual Tourette's Action charity from the podcast is really that we have a lot of knowledge and expertise and support to offer people. So please do go to our website and check out what we have to offer people and find the resources that you can access. If there was one thing that I would say to any future guests doing a podcast with Qualified Tutor, is use this fantastic opportunity to educate the wider community and share your expertise and knowledge to create a world where we are all working together.
We'd love to know, finally, Roshan, as our final question, as it so often is, what's next for you? What's next for Roshan Daryanani?
Great, thank you for asking that. I think at the moment my focus, like I said, is a tutor full time. But what I'm trying to do as well is work on really creating a separate space where I can teach students the skills I wish I'd learned. And right now, and for the foreseeable future, I think that the focus for me is going to be on teaching them skills around money. So, kind of, what is a credit card? How do you open a bank account? What sort of influences your spending? Things like this. And there's a course I run over the holidays a couple of times where I've taught students about these things, and it's been really enjoyable for me, and I hope for them as well. So I hope to take that forward. I'm also, I have these YouTube videos for my older students about these monetary concepts as well. And so that's the project I'm currently working on. And I'm really excited about where it's going to go.
What a lovely place to go. In fact, listeners, you have a wealth of places to head to next. RoshanDaryanani.com. You can connect with Roshan on LinkedIn. As I mentioned before, Roshan is an author as well. So if you head to Amazon or really to any or published book sites, then you can find Roshan there. And finally, if blogging is more of your thing, as I said, Roshan has published over 200 articles on Medium, so you can head to medium.com and just find Roshan there. All of those links will be in the show notes below. But if there is one place or one way for listeners to get in touch with you straight after this, Roshan, what would that be?
I think the website is probably the best bet because everything's on there.
Awesome. Well, that will be at the front and center then of the show notes that you can find after this, listeners. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. This is, as I said, our 144th episode. We are very much looking forward to next week as well, where we'll be speaking to Meera Vasudeva about, she is a former head of English in a school in London and has set up wonderful, huge Facebook groups for English tutors to share resources and ideas. So we'll be talking a little bit about the power of communities and groups and how we can learn together in this online world as educators. But Roshan, for one final time, thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoyed talking a little bit about your background, your career, and what you do.
Thank you so much. It was such a lovely experience. You're a great host.
Thank you for ending on that, Roshan. I imagine becoming podcast host is probably next on your list as well, Roshan. I'm sure it would come to you very naturally.
If I was to do it, then I'll definitely come to you for some tips first.
It's actually, funnily enough, being a podcast host and being an online tutor, well, being a tutor in person anyway, but the two are not too dissimilar. We've often talked on this podcast before about how a tutor is kind of performing almost in a session and bringing their energy and leading the discussion and that kind of thing. So actually, for those of you listening out there, obviously I would never encourage you to set up your own podcast. You must just come and listen to me. But if you do want to set one up, I guarantee you'd have made a good start already in being a podcast host. So just want to think about as we end there. But no, a real pleasure to talk to you, Roshan, and I'm sure it won't be the last time on this podcast.
Great. I look forward to it.
Okay then, everyone. Cheerio. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. Your next step is to check out the Love Tutoring community, and in particular, Love Tutoring Community Connect, a new premium membership space which will serve all your subject-specific CPD needs alongside a friendly, professional community space that meets regularly. Visit qualifiedtutor.org/transformational-training to find out more about our CPD-accredited Level 2 safeguarding and Ofqual recognised courses, the first of their kind in the tutoring industry. See you there.